Also, I stand before you in remembrance of over 10,000 American military individuals, Navy, Marine Corps, Army Air Corps, Coast Guard, who, like myself, were on the island of Oahu that morning and survived that event, but who have themselves since passed on. I am saddened that Jake, who was to be the featured speaker here today, had a problem, and I certainly hope that he will soon be well. And because of his absence, I am going to try to fill you in a little bit, and I hope that in honor to him, I can do somewhat of a decent job. And in order to do so, to give you some idea of what your family members, loved ones, or friends may have experienced that morning, I'm going to share some of that experience that I had there with you. I was a 17-year-old sailor trying to be the very, very best, most dedicated military man that I could possibly be. And as such, I was assigned the 0800 to 1200 security watch at Aerial Patrol Squadron VP 23's hangar, Building 54, located on the harbor inlet end of Naval Air Station Ford Island, right in the center of Pearl Harbor, the bullseye of Pearl Harbor, that long, long ago Sunday morning. I heard when I came to relieve the guy that had the 0400 to 800 watch, we made the rounds. Everything seemed secure. There was nothing out of the ordinary going on. And so I relieved him. He went on to the mess hall, I guess, for breakfast. And since we had just made the rounds and determined that everything was pretty much natural the way it should be, I went up into the upper level personnel office and was attempting to type a letter to my dear sweet mother. You got to realize that prior to joining the Navy, I don't think I had even seen a typewriter, much less had a chance to use one. But I was making progress. I was using that two-finger hunt and peck system, if you know what I mean. Back then, if you could type 40 words a minute, you were considered an expert typist. It was maybe taking me about 4 minutes to do a word, but I was making progress. I was proud of what I was doing. I was really going to impress my family back there on the farm with that typewritten letter. I heard the sound of an approaching aircraft, but you know, we're a naval air station, airplanes come and go. But I should have realized that there had been nothing scheduled for Sunday morning. That sound grew louder and louder, and I'm thinking, oh boy, what's going on here, you know? Suddenly the sound of that airplane changed, and I knew immediately that it was in a power dive. And I'm thinking, oh boy, that must be one of our carrier air group pilots. A couple of the aircraft carriers, the U.S. Lexington and U.S. Enterprise, had left the harbor some days before to deliver short-range aircraft to our military forces on Midway and Wake Island. And I figured they must be returning, and as usual, they will launch their aircraft while they're still out at sea, and those airplanes come in and operate off the land base while they're in the harbor. Suddenly and simultaneously, there was a tremendous roar. Bomb fragments, explosion debris, and window glass came crashing into the back of my head, ears, neck, and onto my shoulders. Those of you who may have experienced some similar events will maybe remember that something like that can kind of derail your plans for the day, if you know what I mean. Anyway, it did mine. It took me a little while to gather my stuff back together from the concussion from that bomb blast. And when I did, I'm thinking it's one of our friendly air group hot dogging crashed. I'm going to go down and see if I could be of some help. When I got on the lower level, went out through the narrow opening left at the unclosed end of that big rolling steel hangar door, the sound of another airplane. I looked up, and although it wasn't fully daylight yet, I could make out the outline of this airplane in a steep, steep power dive, and I'm seeing what's looking like blinking or flashing lights on the front, hearing strange popping and buzzing sounds all about me, but I don't recognize either of them for what they were. Later, I was told that what I thought were blinking or flashing lights was actually machine gun muzzle flashes, and those popping, buzzing, and whizzing sounds that I was hearing were those machine gun bullets striking and passing through the structure of a twin-engine patrol bomber that was parked near to where I was standing, then ricocheting off the concrete apron on which it was parked. But since I didn't recognize them for what they were, I didn't consider them any danger to me. My interest was just with a big old bomb that was hanging there between the fixed landing gear on that old Val dive bomber. Suddenly that bomb released, it wobbled as it began to fall, and that airplane began to pull out of its dive. By the time it had completed its dive and was in level flight, I don't think it was any more than 100 or 150 feet over my head. It's then that I first saw and recognized that big brown bit insignia there on the bottom of the wing. Boy, oh boy, that was a surprise to me, you know. I turned around and hurried back inside the hangar, hoping I could find someone with a key to the ammo shack. All of our guns and ammunition was locked up, and I wanted to get a gun and get at these guys, you know. But as I come in the front door of the hangar, the other few that I was on duty with that morning were heading out the back door. Somebody, I suppose a duty officer, spots me and said, "Hey, you, follow me." I went after him. I thought, oh boy, he's in charge here. We'll go get guns and ammo and put up a defense, you know. But when he went out the back door of Building 54, instead of turning to his right and leading everybody down to the ammo shack, he turned to his left, ran out there in the air of the compass rose, jumped into an on-field construction ditch. Everybody followed, jumped in after him. Since I'm coming in the front door, when they're going out the back door, I'm about the last guy into that ditch. I hit the bottom of that ditch, got myself stabilized, looked up. I'm looking right at a guy there in his white uniform. The work uniform was those blue dungaree trousers and a blue chambray work shirt. But he was in his white uniform as though he was going into Honolulu, going to church or something. Never did find out why he was in his white uniform, but I'm so thankful that he was, because there on the left sleeve of that uniform was a petty officer's rating badge. And I recognized the winged round cannonball, the insignia of an aviation ordnance. You the duty ordnance? Yeah. You got a key for the ammo shack? Yeah. Well, let's go get guns and ammo and shoot these blankety blanks, you know. So I hadn't much more than hit the bottom of that ditch, and the roadsman ran away up out of there. Somebody, I suppose the duty officer, shouts, "Get back in the ditch. Get back in the ditch." I don't want to be in that ditch. We're military men. We should be putting up a defense. We shouldn't be here in this ditch. Besides, I know this is the beginning of that war that they've been talking about and we've been preparing for. And I'm from a proud family, and I damned well know that if I'm going to lose my life in this battle or any other battle of this war, I would want my family and my country to know that I died fighting, not hiding. We continued upon that ditch, started to run for the ammo shack. Then I heard the most unexpected military command that I thought I would ever hear in the military, especially under those conditions. We weren't running to get out of the action, we were running to get into the action. Anyway, somebody, again I suppose the duty officer shouts, "Get back in the ditch or I'll put you on report for disobeying a direct order." Hell's bells, talk about being between a rock and a hard spot. These guys in these airplanes are machine gunning and dropping bombs, trying to do as much damage as they could, and that's collateral damage, maybe kill a few of us. And our own duty officer is threatening us with military discipline for wanting to defend ourselves. I couldn't believe it. With total and complete disregard for the threat of military discipline, with total and complete disregard for the fact that aerial bombs and machine gun bullets were falling down the air, raining down on the air to where we were running. We continued to run. We made it to the ammo shack. The ordnance locked the door, let himself in. I'm right behind him. What do you want? Give me a 50 caliber machine gun. I'm a recent farm boy. The biggest gun I'm used to firing on a regular basis is a little shoulder-fired 22 caliber rifle. This is not a shoulder-fired machine gun. It's a fixed mount machine gun. Hell, man, it looked to me like a cannon without wheels. But I took it as best I could, most likely cradled it in my arms, started for the door. By now, I guess a few other brave souls figured they hadn't ought to be in that ditch either. And they'd followed us to the ammo shack. And the guy coming in the door was somewhat taller than I, huskier built. I just offloaded that machine gun to him, saying, "Here, take it to the PBY parked in front of 23's hangar. I'll get the ammo." He looked a bit surprised, but he took a turn out the door he went. I turned around, and there again, I'm so thankful and grateful for that aviation ordnance, because without his willingness to cooperate, to get there and even expose himself to that enemy fire, we could not have done. I could not have set up the defense that I was trying to set up there in that end of Ford Island. Anyway, when he had it, I turned around, he had 2 canisters of 50 caliber ammo sitting up on the counter. I grabbed those 2 canisters of ammunition, turned, and out the door I went. Now, I'm not a runner sprinter, never have been, but I guarantee you, I beat the guy with the gun to the airplane. I guess because he had a heavier load than I did. We were approaching that airplane on the port side, somewhat the southeasterly direction, basically the same direction that the attacking aircraft were approaching from. But the ladder to the end of the airplane was hanging from the starboard gun blister. I ran around the back side of the airplane, set those canisters down, started up the ladder. I don't think I got more than a couple of rungs when it dawned on me, hey, if I get inside this airplane, am I going to be strong enough to reach down and pull that big old gun up inside? I'm not so sure of that. So I jumped down off the ladder, just the guy with the gun that got out there saying, give it to me, you get it inside, I'll hand it to you. Boy, he chopped up that ladder, jumped inside, turned around, reached down. I got the gun to him somehow, most likely muzzle first, which is the lightest end, but which is also a safety no-no. But I don't think either one of us were thinking much about safety right at that time. I shouted, put it in the port blister. That's the side they're coming from. He turned and disappeared into the fuselage of that airplane. I grabbed the canister of that ammo in my left hand, guided myself up the ladder with the right hand, set that inside the airplane, back down, got the second canister, set it inside the airplane, jumped inside, picked up those 2 canisters, turned and stepped across to the port gun blister as if he was swinging that mound gun out and locking it in fire position. I set the canister down under the gun, flipped the lid open, up the end of the belt, ready to load, thinking he'd have the breech open. But he was just standing there staring skyward. I looked up and here comes another one of those airplanes in a power dive. Same old blinking flashing lights, big old bomb hanging on the bottom. Man, I couldn't wait on this other guy to get his train of thoughts back together. I just reached over, slid the lock forward, threw the breech open, fed the end of the belt into the loading mechanism, slammed the breech shut, grabbed the charging pin, pulled it back and let it go. Bam! We got a round in the chamber. Shoot! I shouted, and he pulled the trigger. Now, I guess he was one of those guys that thought with a machine gun, you don't have to aim. You just point in the general direction and fire away. Because I stood there and watched those tracer bullets fly off through empty space, somewhere near to where that airplane had one spin. Back there in the prairie pothole part of Minnesota, where I was raised on a farm, you became a hunter and a gatherer real early in life. And you also better become a good shot, because being a good shot would oftentimes mean the difference of whether you would or would not have food on the table. I shouted, let me get the next one. He dropped that gun down, stepped aside. I brought it back up to firing position. Just as I did, here comes another one of those airplanes in a power dive. Same old blinking flashing lights, big old bomb hanging there on the bottom. Man, I got a bead and a lead. A bead and a lead. I continued to lead and squeeze the trigger. I continued leading and firing, all the while that airplane come down, completed its power dive, pulled out into level flight. I watched those tracer bullets fly through the air. It looked like every one of them were at that big old round opening on the front of that old air-cooled radial engine dive bomber, then stitched the stitch right down the bottom of the fuselage. Now, some of you may know and remember that following each one of those tracer bullets, there were 4 regular bullets. Another tracer, 4 more regular bullets. So I know here and I know here that I did some damage to that aircraft, but you're not going to be watching him to see what happens to him. He's going away. He's no longer a threat. If you want to survive, you damn well better be looking for the next one that's coming at you. I've looked around, I don't see any more in the power dive, but there's one out over the channel, maybe 2 city blocks away, well within the range of a 50 caliber machine gun. He's not in the power dive, but a steep banking and descending left turn, as though he's lining up to make another machine gun run in the area. Because he's in that banking turn, I can see the cockpit 6 or 8 feet behind the front of that airplane. I figure at that distance and at that speed, if I use the front of that airplane as my aiming point, I'm going to get some rounds into the fuselage, maybe even into the cockpit. And believe you me, folks, if you can get a couple of 50 caliber slugs bouncing around inside that cockpit with that pilot, you're going to give him something else to think about besides coming back and machine gunning your area a second time. I maintained that lead, squeezed the trigger, brrr. I don't think I got off more than maybe 8, 10, a dozen rounds, but I saw at least 2 of those tracer bullets seem to disappear into the fuselage of that airplane just forward of the cockpit. And when they did, that airplane did an abrupt rolling right turn and was gone from my field of fire. No more aircraft came back to bomb or to strafe our island that morning. I stayed at that gun. I got to fire some short bursts at other aircraft as they passed through my limited field of fire on their way to or from other targets, but no more head-on Turkish shoots like those first ones were. I stayed at that gun. Later on, about halfway through that raid, about the same time that the second wave of those attacking aircraft came in, I got to fire short bursts on some of those aircraft as they passed through my limited field of fire. But by now, and also the U.S. Nevada came down the channel, making a run for open water. Boy, oh boy, those pilots, those airplanes got on it like a swarm of bees. They were hoping they could sink it there in the channel, and that would have blocked the harbor for some time. And I got to fire short bursts at some of those aircraft as they too passed through my limited field of fire. But by now, our own aircraft parked on the ramps and on the apron, and an adjacent hangar, Building 6, Hangar 1, all of which were between where I was firing from there in front of Building 54 and where the USS Nevada was headed in the area of Hospital Point. Those airplanes and that hangar was beginning to burn so fiercely it just obliterated that field of fire. 50 years later, I went back to Pearl Harbor. After walking around there that morning, first we attended the memorial service in remembrance, then sort of toured the area and looked over all those artifacts that were on display there from that long, long ago event, then boarded the very first one of those white boats to go out to the USS Arizona Memorial. As I walked the gangway from that boat that took us out there to the memorial itself, look over the side, the hull of that vessel resting there on the bottom of the harbor, then the names of all those individuals on the honor wall, and know that there are still approximately 900 of the earthly remains of those crew members still down there, still aboard that vessel. I promised then that someday, somehow, some way, I would try to do something that would hopefully extend the memory of that event and of their service. And it's because of that that I stand before you here today, hoping that if I've shared my experience with you, then it will give you some idea of what those family members, loved ones, may have experienced that morning, but unfortunately did not live to share that information with you. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the beacon light atop Mount Diablo. It used to be on as a highway of lights all across the U.S. for the fledgling airmail service way back in 1928. That beacon burned until the 8th of December of 1941, at which time it was turned off because it could be used by the enemy as a navigational assistant. And it stayed turned off until 1964, when the Pearl Harbor Survivors Association got permission to refurbish it as best they could at that time and relight it on December 7th in honor and in remembrance of our sunken shipmates and fallen comrades. As time passed, that beacon became very dim and inoperative. The individual that took it on himself to try to take care of that beacon would go up there on December 7th and rotate it by hand if necessary to get that going. We had a meeting, and at that meeting I tried to express to all of those individuals that were there how important it was, at least to me, to have that beacon as a way to reach back across the miles and the years and reconnect once again mentally with our sunken shipmates and fallen comrades. It took quite a while and a lot of work, but finally By December 7th in 2012, we had all the permits in place. And you can't imagine how many permits you've got to get when you are going to do something with an historic item like that beacon had become. By 2013, all the beacon had been taken down, refurbished into better than new, and reinstalled. So that I'm thankful and grateful to each and every one of you that may be here today that participated in that event to get that beacon refurbished and reestablished. This evening, when that light is shining, I encourage, and also on December 7th, Memorial Day, Veterans Day, and December 7th, find yourselves a vantage point where you can see the top of Mount Diablo. If you will stand for a while and watch that beacon as it rotates and sends its newer, brighter, and broader beam of remembrance out across all the valleys below, then if you will put yourselves in the right frame of mind, and if you will listen not only with your ears, but with grateful hearts and respectful minds, then all of those individuals will communicate with you. They will do so in unison, as if with one voice, and their message, their plea, will always be the same. Remember us. Remember us. We gave our lives while in service to you.